keep this while they're doing?
Yeah, ask Mr. Jim. Go that way. Go. He'll help you.
Oh, yeah, my brother.
Good pile of kids. Before I get into some of the details, a couple announcements real quick as they're leaving. One of the things that's important to us at Go Church is that we do things that are outside of this building. In fact, I think a church should be defined by what happens outside of Sunday morning. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about what happens Monday through Saturday and kind of how we can be involved in our community and what God has for us to do. So with that being said, we kind of have a culture shift where what we're trying as a church is any fifth Sunday month, which happens to be July, we want to do something that isn't on campus. So this month, the last Sunday of July 29th, we're not going to be meeting here at the school. We're going to be meeting at the beach. And we're going to do service over there and kind of do something a little bit different. So July 29th should be pretty cool. That's kind of coming up. A goal for us to kind of be out in the community, do something a little bit different. That's end of this month. So don't miss that. Again, as we jump into this, I think most of you know this, but I just want to continue to tell you what is valuable to this church. We care very much that you would be connected to Jesus first. If you have not figured out what his relationship is and what that looks like for you on a personal level, don't pass that step. As far as the next steps we want you to take here at this church and what does God have for me to do next, for a lot of you, if you don't know Jesus, that's the place you start. And we want to help you do that. And so that's step number one, discovering who Jesus is. And then from there, we've learned that God has more for us in mind than just that independent individual relationship with him. We're meant to do it in community. So being a part of the celebration on Sundays, during the week with connect groups, however you can do that, you're not meant to do life alone. So we want you to be connected to people. We want you to celebrate with others. And that's the way God, I think, grows us the best, is when we're in relationship with each other. And then from there, since you've kind of gotten involved, if you want to know more about this church, we did something else last month and we want to continue to do this, where on the last Sunday of the month, which again, July will be a little bit different, we kind of have this little pizza party for a half an hour or so last weekend. And so if you want to know more about us, our DNA, what makes Go Church, then I invite you on you'll hear more about it as we announce it, but those last Sundays of the month, that isn't a fifth Sunday, we're going to have this time to come hang out a little bit after service and know more about our church and why we do what we do. And so after that, we mentioned it a lot of times, I hope you hear this all the time, that you are connected to people. You are better together, so we want you in a connect group. That you don't do life by yourself. You need other people. So if you're not connected to a group of people yet, man, it's time for you to figure that out because you're missing out. So we want you to discover that. And then from there, and you guys do a great job with this, but we want you to get connected to serving somewhere. And so find an opportunity that we believe every person is made with a specific skill set. And if you offer that to the kingdom, man, God's going to take that and go to town with it. And the cool thing is there's plenty of ministry opportunities here at Go Church, but there are a lot of things yet to be discovered that we haven't done yet. A lot of you have skill sets that we haven't innovated a way to use that in the kingdom yet. And so if you feel like there's more that you have to offer, let's investigate that together. Let's find where you can serve best in his kingdom because he's got a lot for you to do. And then last but not least, we want you to be connected in discipleship. And that's what we're going to talk about all this month. Why it's so important to invest in other people. In fact, that's the point. Just kind of made it clear a little bit to the kids and just right off the bat, the whole month, it's the simple idea is there is nothing better you can do with your time. Nothing better, I believe, you can do with your life than invest in people. Then give your life over for other people. There are things that God has in your life that you are called to pass on to others. To take what you've been given and give that away so that other people will go further and faster than you ever could. And so the Apostle Paul, he went through some of this. A lot of cool situations for him where he met Jesus and ran this crazy race as he was a missionary in all these different places and planted churches and met people and did these different things that he came in contact with Timothy. And he shared a lot of things with Timothy. And these are the two characters we're going to look at all this month and kind of see what God teaches us through their relationship together. And it's interesting as their kind of story comes to a close, Paul's final epistle was 2 Timothy, and he's writing this in prison, and he writes some words that are very powerful to us and specifically to Timothy. And in fact, I kind of want to tell you part of the end of the story right now with this verse. If you'll put that first one up there, Ian. This is 2 Timothy 4, verse 7. Paul is confessing to him. He says, listen, I fought the good fight. I've run the race. I've kept the faith. He would later die in that prison. And this would be the last letter that he would write as far as the timeline of his life. And so these words are very, very important. This fight and this race that we're a part of it. And so it is an interesting idea to kind of break down what maybe the race might be for us. I know for me personally, I've said it to some of you, I feel like I'm in this not for a sprint, but for a marathon. Like this is something I plan on doing the rest of my life, and to have a longer vision of what God's doing in our life. But one of the races that I think gets a lot of pretty neat application, and the text points to this some places, is this relay race. And so what can you learn about your life as a Christian with a relay race? Well, I think there's a couple of very powerful things. A relay race has 4 racers usually, and they're going for a 400-meter race, and they got to pass that baton between all 4 of them and complete that in the best time that they can. But what's kind of interesting about this race is it really doesn't matter what racer is in what order. It really matters that the baton makes it across the finish line. And so sometimes it's easy to think that whoever's the fastest or the most talented, the individual carries the most weight in the race, and that's really not true at all. In fact, the baton getting to the finish line is the most important part. And so what does that mean for you? It means we've got a mission, and that's more important than your individual leg of the race. And so it's going to get accomplished. Jesus said it's going to happen. He's going to go meet disciples of all nations, and we get to play a role in that. And so maybe there's more to your life than your legacy. Maybe you can play a bigger role in his big story and instead of just to your own. And so that mission getting accomplished, we get to play a role in that. And that's an important part of what you and I are called to do. It's interesting, too, in this race, these 4 racers, that when they're functioning the way they're supposed to and things are going right, if you were to take 4 racers with their individual 100-meter race and their speed and compare that to what happens when they race together, they actually go faster when they run with each other. And so sometimes we're better when we're together. I think a lot of us, and I mentioned it before with kind of part of our DNA, you're meant to do life with other people. You will go further, you will go faster, you will go better when you do this thing called Christianity, this relay race of life with other people like-minded, with people that will challenge you, with people that will continue to invest in your life. And so you're better when you run the race with other people. Don't miss that. Another thing that's really interesting is in this relay race, they care very much about that handoff, that very, my goodness, kind of stressful moment where they got to get their muscle memory just right, and they're trying to run at their top speed, and then the runner that's about to get the baton's got to run at their top speed, and that handoff, they practice that over and over and over again, because that handoff is a very significant part of the race, and they don't want to mess that up, and so they work very hard at passing it on to the next runner in the race. But I got to be honest with you, for me, when I think about Christianity, think about Christian leaders, this idea has not been modeled to me very well. I want to learn how better to practice and be efficient at handing off the baton to other people. Because I believe God has things for me already to give over to other people. I believe there are people in your life that you need to hand some things over and figure out how to do that well. Because you will succeed different people, and other people will take your place. And how well are you thinking about the people that come after you? And for some of you, you have opportunity to step up, and so you need to kind of get in the same speed as the people ahead of you and learn what they're going through so that you're all the ready for those opportunities when it's your turn to step up and your turn to take the place of the runner. And so God has a lot to teach us about what it means to be prepared for those moments, because he has a lot of opportunities for you, and there's a lot of things he wants us to do that we would learn about other people. One more thing about this race that's interesting, though, is even if they drop the baton in the middle of the race somehow, they're not disqualified. I mean, of course, their time isn't maybe what they want it to be, but they are not out of the race. And just because there's opportunities for you to invest in other people and to be invested in, and you and I missed the boat. There might have been opportunities for you to really grow a whole lot with somebody, and you just kind of didn't get a chance to do it, or you've made mistakes that kind of kept you out of that opportunity. That's okay. The race is not over, and you're not disqualified for it. And so in this great race we run together, and we learn a little bit from the Apostle Paul. Man, there's a lot more that he wants to show us. And it's important. It's important that we do invest in people, that we do continue to do this mission that God called us to, this thing called planting churches and raising up leaders and making disciples. This is an important part of the kingdom. If there were a church for every 10,000 people to make that work in Hernando County, I talked to a couple different pastors about this. Is kind of cool, is that right now what it seems like is there's 80 to 90,000 people in Spring Hill in Hernando County that don't know Jesus. And so that would be nine churches to make a real impact. And so we got a lot of work to do. But that's if it was one church per 10,000 people. And so this race is not a joke. There are approximately 6,500 languages spoken in the world today. And there are the need to have the Bible translated in all of those languages so people can know the good news of the gospel. Guess how many languages have yet to be translated into a language they can read the scripture? There are 4,000 languages that need the good news of the gospel. There's a lot of work to do. This kind of blows my mind when I think about it, but there's another stat that kind of on every second, that there's someone that every minute 62 people pass away that probably don't know Jesus. The mission is important. The harvest is plentiful and the workers are few. This is for a reason. And when Jesus said, go make disciples of all nations, and that I want you to baptize them, I want you to teach them everything that I commanded of you, this is what that means. You take everything you've been taught, everything that Jesus invested into you, and find ways to pass that on. And here's maybe the kicker, because I would like it to be organized in a program that makes sense, but it should be no surprise to me that Jesus finishes the statement by saying, I will be with you to the very end of the age. You know why? Because this ain't going to happen overnight. Because you invest your life in this. Hey, I want you to invest in people. I want you to pour your life into them and give your whole life to it. In fact, I'll be with you for that whole life. So what does it mean for you to pass what you've been taught on to other people? Again, Paul realizes how important this is, and he did quite a lot of things in his time in ministry, and God taught him a lot of different things, but he knew that his time was coming to a close. And so one of the things he says, if you'll pull up for me 2 Timothy 2:2, is that he wants us to focus on this idea. He's talking to Timothy. And the things you have heard me say in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to reliable people who will also be qualified to teach others. And this is, again, his last words to Timothy. And so it was very important to him that what's been taught, what's been proclaimed, that would be put in other people's reliable hands that could be trustworthy, that could take the words and continue that message moving forward. It can be a difficult idea to make disciples that make disciples, and that's something that you've heard before in church that we care a lot about. But maybe a way that will make sense to you, that's definitely helped me out a whole lot, is just this idea that it is worth everything for me to invest in other people. And I meant everything I said when those kids were sitting up here. And I heard from, it was Andy Stanley. He says, it might not be something that you do, but somebody that you raise be your biggest impact in the world. And so is there anything better than investing in our kids? Is there anything more fulfilling as a parent than watching them know Jesus and go further and farther than we ever could? I don't know that there is. And I'm so grateful I get to know that as a parent. Because I remember thinking, man, you know what? What's really valuable is that the legacy that I have as a person, the things that I can do. And man, I had kids and I realized, man, it is a moment that I'm here and then I'm gone. And so how can I take all that I've been taught? And I talked to plenty of you, and I remember these kind of days where it's like, man, I know a lot of what not to do, and so I can take a lot of things I've learned I shouldn't do, and I can save my kids some real time and hurt and heartache and help them do what they ought to do. And then I've learned a lot of things about God's grace and His identity that He gives me, and so I need to give that to my kids. I need to give that to any person I can to pass on that legacy that He has poured into my life, because this great big mission is bigger than me. It's bigger than you. And He's called you into an opportunity to do something with what you've been given. And so again, this month we're going to focus a lot on what it looks like to pass on what you've been given and how that works in your real life. And let me just tell you from this church, I think if we figure out how to do this and do it right, man, the sky's the limit. And I've confessed to you before that this is our mission, to go make disciples, and we're married to that mission, but the model of how we do it, I'm okay with that changing. That will evolve over time. But no, that's the heartbeat of this church, is that we figure out how best to do what He said to do. So I got to tell you, there will be no perfect way for you to invest in other people, but I want you to consider what it means to start. I want you to consider what people in your life you need to share what you've been taught. Man, I can never forget those moments in youth ministry where I was taught that instead of looking in the mirror and seeing my own reflection, but seeing what God sees in me, that changed my confidence. That changed who I saw in myself. And I could have just kind of kept that to myself and been someone that seems a little more confident for whatever reason. But I would have wasted that information that He gave me. Instead, I took it to teenagers, to middle schoolers, and I told them that they were loved by God, that their identity was in Him, and no matter what they've done or who they think they are, or what other people have told them about themselves, they're loved by their Creator. To see that light turn on and know that they're worth more than that, man, that's worth a lot. That's worth everything to me. And so taking what I've been given from Him and making sure other people get to know it, that's so important. One of the things I kind of had to find out the hard way was being a Christian. It's hard. I think I was manipulated into the idea of things would get easier. And I thought that problems would go away and things would just kind of fix themselves, and I didn't think I had to do any work to make it happen. But I had to learn the hard way that this whole thing of denying yourself and following Jesus wherever He leads you, that's difficult. And so when I talk to people, I got to pass on, hey, this is hard, but this is worth it. This is not going to be a walk in the park, and you've heard it say before maybe that this isn't a cruise ship, this is a battleship. This is something that requires your whole life because there's more to your life. And so I want people to know that so that they can go further faster, so they can understand this thing called kingdom living and being more like Jesus and run the race as best as they possibly can. And I want to be able, when the moment is right, to be able to take all that I have and pass it on that race so that my kids and the next people that come behind us will go much further and much faster. And you know as well as I do, the world that we live in is a difficult place. And I was having this conversation with my mother-in-law the other day, and I don't know if every generation does this. I think they do. Or I say, man, I'm worried about the world my kids are going to grow up in and what it's going to be like for them and the struggles that they might run into. And so, I have that worry, and I know that my parents had that worry, and I'm sure their parents did as well. But at the end of the day, I know that if I give them the good news, isn't there nothing to worry about? If they know the truth that sets them free, there is no boogeyman bigger than the gospel. There is no enemy more threatening to them than the love of Jesus Christ. And so is there anything better I can do with my life than invest the knowledge of His saving grace in those beautiful kids? I don't think there is. And I want to live for that. And not just my children, but your children and our children, because there's a world full of people that still think they're not worth a whole lot. And God doesn't even know who they are. And they sit even right now today on a Sunday morning, maybe getting ready to go outside on the beach because it's getting warm out there, and they don't know up from down. And they're just kind of making it through life. They might believe that God's real, and they might believe that there's hope, but they need a person to show them the way to go. And you know how I know that's true? Because I needed that. And I had that. And I can tell you what, man, I've had multiple different people pour into my life. I think I wish there was one person that I was running after, and it was always one guy that I could learn from. And I mean, if I was honest, that one person has always only been Jesus. But I kind of wish there was people. I wish my dad would have been that person. I wish I had people in my life when I was in my 20s and in my high school years where I really had someone to tell me what to do, but I kind of didn't, and I suffered for it. But as I got older and as I got connected to CCW, to this place, to other Christian people in my life, I learned a lot from Joe over here, from Jeff, from Dave, and all these different people passed on a lot of things for me that changed me into who I am today. And so I'm so grateful for that multitude of people that were willing to pour into me in the level that they could. And I wanted more of that. And so there are people in your life that want more of what it is that you've got. And I don't know who those people are, but that's what we're going to focus in on. That's what I really want to spend some time all this month digging into. What does it really mean to invest in people? One of my favorite movies, I remember this would have been like elementary school Jake. Watch this movie, Mr. Holland's Opus. You ever see that one? And I didn't know I was going to cry like I did, but I cried at the end of that movie because if you've seen the movie before, there's this musician, and he becomes a teacher. Kind of reluctantly, doesn't want to be a teacher of music, but loves music, so decides to do it anyway. And so spends his whole career, his whole life, teaching students about music, kind of always hoping that he could get back onto the stage and kind of perform in front of a lot of people and use his musical ability that way. But instead, it seems like life has it to where he's teaching all these students about music so that maybe they would get a chance to do it. And he does that for his whole life, and he's got his ups and downs, and things happen in his life. And the movie ends where it's his last day at school, and he's getting ready to retire, kind of finish his time. And so he's getting ready to leave the school, and his wife and his kids are with him, and they usher him into the cafeteria, or whatever it was, and there was a room full of people. He's, was there some kind of show today, like something happened I didn't know about? And so to his surprise, they bring him up on the stage and they kind of present to him that this is his opus, this is his great masterpiece. That it maybe wasn't a song that he performed, but it was people that he poured into. And so he got to see this room full of people cheering for him because he poured his life into these other musicians, these other talented people, so that they might go further. And I think for him in that moment, he realized something that I'm still trying to figure out, that maybe the people I pour my life into are more valuable than projects I think are so important to me. That maybe if I give my life to people versus projects and programs and things that I think I should do, in fact, even as a church, I spend so much energy and time thinking about the program, thinking about what you guys are presented with on a Sunday. And I think somehow that is the value, but I miss and I know, and I have to be reminded all the time, it is the people in the room, it is the people sitting next to you that are most important. And I hope for every single one of you, maybe not on this side of heaven, but I think on that side, I have a feeling there will be a stage waiting for you. And I have a feeling that you're going to get to look out and see all the people, if you so choose, that you've poured your life into, and how they will go further and farther than you ever could. And I think that's the kind of song I want to sing. That's the kind of program I want to be a part of, is to see other people go further. And so investing in people is worth it. And in fact, I know it's true because that's the way Jesus decided to do it. He said, I'm going to take these 12, I'm going to pour my life into them. And so the world changed when he invested in a few. And so what does it mean for you to think about the people in your life that you need to pass on all that you've been taught by God to others? And maybe there are still, and I'm sure there are people that God placed in your life that have a lot to pass on to you. And it could be that some of the things they've got to say to you is going to challenge you. I know my generation specifically can wrestle with tough love, and so if you don't say something I agree with, I think that you're against me, and so we've got to kind of learn to get past that. And so there's some people in your life that might have things to say to you that you don't want to hear, but they still love you anyway. And I think with wisdom, if you pursue that, you'll be better off because of it. There are people that have a lot to teach you. You are not done learning. If you ever get to the place where you think you've got it all figured out about God, then you might just be without Him. Because the closer I get to Him, the more I've got questions about who He is in the first place. And so there's a lot to learn, and God's got people in your life to teach you. Be open to that. Be open to being taught. And again, who is it that you can pour into? And so for today, again, we're going to talk about it all month, but for today I want to leave you with kind of two easier ideas. And just as we start thinking about what we've been taught and how we can pass on what we've been given, and to see what Paul was talking to Timothy about, that, man, this race of life is important, but it isn't my legacy. It's that the baton is passed on. It's that the mission is moved forward. It's that this actually happens in our lifetime, and that maybe your glory is not the best thing you can live for. Maybe the big story is, because you're a blink of an eye, and then we're going to be back with the King. And so what impact are you going to have for the short time that you're here? I would argue there is no better thing to do with your time than invest in people. And so maybe a simple thing, say something to those people. I am convinced, I am standing here because a lot of people told me that I think I could do it. A lot of you that were sitting here said, I think you could do this. And so I needed that encouragement to be where I'm at today. Maybe there's somebody in your life right now, they just need some encouraging words from you. Some words of challenge, whatever God might have for you, but there's people that you need to speak truth into their life. So would you say something to them? Would you take all that you've been taught by Jesus and find a way to tell it to them? Because that's what I believe He called us to do. And the second step should help that first one quite a bit, is maybe what you need to do is just pray for that person. And so we're going to do that today. Pray that their heart would be open to hearing the gospel. Pray that you would have the heart to where you actually want this person to be more successful than you are. Pray that you would be open, that your heart would be softened to the truth that you need to hear from others. That you would be willing to grow in whatever way God wants to teach you, ways that you like and ways that you don't. Because I believe He works through people. I believe that people are the most important thing. And so let's invest in them. Let's pass on what we've been given. What Jesus has taught you over the years has changed your life. Let's give that to them. Let's complete this mission that He called us to, and let's run that race and finish it well. So that's what I'm going to challenge you to do. And so in fact, we're going to pray right now, and I want you to think about maybe a person or two. And so I'm going to pray first, give you guys a moment of silence just to kind of pray for those people in your life, that God would open up their hearts for what you need to say, and that God would open up your hearts, that you would listen to others as well. So let me pray, and I'm going to give you guys a moment. Father, I love you. I thank you for those beautiful kids, man. They keep popping in my mind. And I just pray, Father, that we would model this out to them, that they would see Jesus in their mom and dad, that they would see what it means to give their life over to something more important. Help us to teach them what it means to be selfless, to be brave, to be courageous, to be passionate, to be loving, be full of joy. God, help us to pour all that we've been given into them. Help us to, the way that you want us to keep them out of trouble. I know it's almost like write a passage. They got to go through stuff to learn, and that's tough, and we want them to be rid of any of those mistakes. But I just pray you help us to keep their way straight, to teach them all we've been taught, and help them to go into the world as the workers of the harvest and bring in that group of people, those many, many people that need to know you. God, help us to grow leaders in this church. Help us to grow a group of people that care about the mission so much that we want to continue doing it in all different places. Help us be a church that plants churches. Help us be a leadership that builds leaders. Help us be a group of disciples that makes disciples. Help us to pass on all that you've poured into our life, because if we hold it by ourselves, if we keep the good news that you spent your blood on for us and hold it by ourselves, I think we've missed the point. But even if we drop the baton and we've been away from your home for a little while, you've still given us more in this race to run. And I pray we would take every chance we get to go as hard and as best as we can and run the race for you, to finish well, to fight the good fight, to invest all that we can in other people and pour our lives into them because they matter. We love you, God. We thank you for pouring your life into us and showing us a new way of doing life. We love you, Father. You're the best. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.